In the Dragon Ball franchise, there are a number of different plot holes, with them seeming to pop up in nearly every arc, especially in Dragon Ball Z onward. In the last edition of Plot Holes, I took a look at Vegito's plan and the events surrounding Buu absorbing him. A very divisive example for sure. This time, I'll be taking a look at another one from the previous arc of the manga, the Cell Saga. This can be found shortly after the newly reunited Piccolo met Cell for the first time, when he was doing his best Bond villain impression in explaining his creation and plan to Piccolo. During this exposition dump, Cell explained to Piccolo how he came to be. This included a list of cells that had been acquired from various fighters. On this list was Goku, Vegeta, Piccolo, Frieza, and King Cold, among other components. This is all well and good, and was explained numerous times. However, the problem lies in how Dr. Gero's computer obtained the cells from King Cold and Frieza. Now, as it was explained by Cell, due to the length of his development, Dr. Gero's computer was left to the task of finishing his creation. When King Cold and Frieza were killed, Gero's computer used spy bots to collect their cells. This is also why Dr. Gero was unaware of Super Saiyan. However, according to Cell, the one who killed Frieza and King Cold in his timeline was future Trunks, who Gero's computer elected to not collect cells from due to already having enough from the other Saiyans. This is a problem because such a scenario never could have happened. The reason for this comes down to time travel, specifically the timelines each event takes place within. Now, while future Trunks arrived from the future and killed Frieza and his father in what we know as the main timeline is actually an alternate timeline that was created when Cell traveled back in time. Cell, however, came from the original timeline. This is the timeline where Goku died of the heart virus. The androids killed most of the Z fighters, and the original Trunks traveled back in time to save an unseen timeline. After this, he used an unknown means to defeat the androids. However, he was then killed by Cell before he had the chance to travel back in time and tell everyone of his victory, which is when Cell traveled back in time before Trunks and created the main timeline.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
The point to all of this is that in the original timeline that Cell is from, there was no time travel interference, meaning that instead of Trunks stepping in to defeat Frieza and his father, Goku instead used the instant transmission to travel to the Earth from his space pod and defeat them himself, something which he told Trunks he would have done until he sensed Trunks' energy. This is where Gero's spy bots would have retrieved the Frieza clan cells. So why did Cell instead claim that Trunks was the one to kill King Cold and Frieza? Well, some have argued in the past that perhaps Cell was referring to the present timeline. After all, Piccolo only really knew of that reality, so perhaps Cell was explaining how his main timeline counterpart received the cells. However, this explanation was in the context of Cell's own backstory. Another possibility that's been raised has to do with the Multiverse Theory. Essentially, in this theory, due to the nature of time travel and how time flows, there will always be a Trunks who travels back in time, which causes an endless number of divergences in the timeline. Thus, from this point of view, Cell came from a timeline that Trunks also traveled back to and interfered in its natural progression. However, being a fictional world, Dragon Ball has its own rules for time travel, which were explained in the series, albeit contradicted a few times, especially in Dragon Ball Super. There were only 4 timelines in Dragon Ball Z and 5 in Dragon Ball Super after the events with Goku Black. So again, Cell's timeline is the original, and the events from his timeline led to the divergences, meaning that there would be no alternate future Trunks that traveled to his reality. Ultimately, there is no real in-universe answer to this. So what is the out-of-universe answer? Well, as I said in a different plot holes video covering another plot hole from this conversation, Toriyama made a mistake while writing Cell's dialogue. Much like when Cell said that Trunks set the time machine to travel sooner than before, Toriyama likely became confused over who should have killed Frieza and Cold in Cell's timeline. So with his noteworthy memory problems and unlikeliness to go back and check before his deadline, Toriyama wrote what he thought would have happened. However, it ended up being impossible within the course of his narrative. So in conclusion, as to the question of is this a plot hole, the evidence suggests yes. And while people have and will come up with their own headcanons about the situation, like maybe Cell fell down a ravine and hit his head on an even stronger rock than Goku did, and then made everything up as he went along, there is no satisfactory in-universe explanation. As a result, this just ends up being another plot hole to add to the list of those in the Dragon Ball franchise. So let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Do you agree with this video or disagree? Also, if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.